జర్నలిస్ట్ విప్లవశ్రీ. మనం సమాజంలో చాలా జరుగుతున్న విషయాల్ని చూస్తున్నాము. భారతదేశ రాజకీయ పరిస్థితులు ఎట్లా ఉన్నాయి చూస్తున్నాము. ఇట్లాంటి నిమిషంలో మేధావులు ఇంకా రచయితలు కవుల అవసరం ఎట్లా ఉందో మనం చూస్తూనే ఉన్నాము. అయితే ప్రస్తుతం మీ ముందు నేను ఒక రచయిత్రిని ఉంచాను. అయితే తను మామూలుగా అందరూ రాసేది కాకుండా సమాజంలో ఏం జరుగుతుంది, భారతదేశ రాజకీయ వ్యవస్థలో, అంతేకాకుండా సొసైటీలో జరుగుతున్న వాటన్నింటికీ కూడా అద్దం పట్టే విధంగా తను బడుగు బలహీన వర్గాల గురించి రాస్తుంది, యాంటీ కాస్టిజం గురించి రాస్తుంది, ఒక యాక్టివిస్ట్గా ముందుకెళ్తుంది. మీనా కందస్వామి గారితో మనం ఈ రోజు ఉన్నాము. తనతో మాట్లాడి ఎన్నో విషయాల్ని మనం ఆవిష్కరించే ప్రయత్నం చేద్దాం. హలో మ్యామ్.
Hello, hi.
I'm so happy to see you here. Of course, the reason you visited Hyderabad is a bit sad, and first of all, my very first question is, how could you define the state in the context of Sai Babas' loss?
Yeah, thank you for having me on your show. And it's very tragic circumstances that made us meet in Hyderabad today. I think Professor Sai Babas' case is a standout example of what is wrong with the way the Indian state's democracy and the many institutions have not functioned properly, right? So you see that the judiciary, which should have given him bail at multiple points of time, never gave him bail. You see that the police have, at the end it's found out that the case was flimsy, there was not enough grounds to charge him, and most of the evidence was not really based. So you find that, and the political will, you realize that it was a witch hunt in so many ways, because people were going after him, calling him a Maowadi, calling him an urban Naxal, saying that he's a dangerous mind. So you see the collapse of the executive, the legislature and the judiciary all at once. And the media also has failed us. Like, the media could have highlighted this case, made sure that he ran a campaign for him, made sure that he was released much earlier than 10 years. So I think that in so many ways Sai Babas' case proves to us why the Indian state as a structure is compromised, and why anybody who challenges or poses the smallest challenge to the ruling class ideology will be punished. So I think that's my primary takeaway from looking at Sai.
Yeah, Sai Babas' demise is a very big loss to the society, Indian society especially. So while you were speaking, you have told some words that urban Naxalite. So these,
it's not my word, it's Modi's word.
Of course it's Modi's word. My point is, when the people start questioning to the state, then they are trying to mention us as the badges, like these are urban Naxals. In this context, how could we understand the state's policies?
I think it's quite interesting, because I think at some point Modi also used the word Andolan Jeevi, saying that there are people who live with revolution as the primary concept. And urban Naxal was it is not just one bad word or bad badge. I think it's the basis for the kind of hunt down, for the kind of clamp down, for the kind of locking of dissent. Because the minute you start to question the state, they call you an urban Naxal, because Naxalites are normally supposed to be underground. They're not supposed to be public. They're supposed to be working in rural areas. And when they call you Naxal, it's also not just because okay, it's some kind of left wing. The next step is to call you a terrorist, because they would say then that the Naxalites are a banned organization and you're part of a banned organization. And once they call you a terrorist, I think right now, it's not just India but anywhere in the world, if somebody is labeled a terrorist, you can do anything to that person. You can hold them in custody, you can rape them, you can torture them. And not only one person, if you can call an entire community as terrorist, you can bomb them. You see that happening in Palestine, you see that happening in Gaza, you see that happening in like places like central India, where all these encounters are happening. The minute you call people as terrorists, you can do whatever you want. And so calling people urban Naxal is the first stepping stone. It means we are free to attack these people.
When we look up to the state policies and the politics especially, BJP is behaving with the two faces. One side it is a fascist party, and the other side it is just saying because it Bharat throughout the country, and during the political during the political campaigns and all those things, they are saying ki it's Vikasit Bharat, we are going to respect all the people's rights and responsibilities and all those things, but exclusively it is mentioning in such a way, but internally it is also following the inclusive religious politics, right? In this context, how could we understand the BJP's strategies?
I don't think the BJP is not saying they're not fascist. They've never said we are not fascist, because right from the days of the Hindu Mahasabha and right from the time the RSS was, founded here, they have always been very open about the fact that they are inspired by fascism, by Mussolini, and by Nazism, by Hitler. So they have never said that these are not our icons. In Golwalkar's work, there is this open homage to these kind of figures, fascist figures. So it's whether it's Mussolini or Hitler. So the BJP has never said I'm not fascist. But what it does, and this is true to all fascist movements around the world, is that whenever there's extreme poverty, fascists are always like, okay, let's just address the poverty. Let's just do some top dressing. So that kind of very small levels of what you can quote unquote call welfare measure. Let's say that 80 crore people in this country are getting 5 kilos of ration. So that Modi wants to say is a big achievement, but it's actually not an achievement, because it means so many people need subsidy to survive. It means so many people don't have recourse to actually getting rice, don't have actually recourse to getting wheat. So I think that, and I don't think these are two phases of BJP. They have caused such enormous poverty. They have depleted the system. They have led to such inflation that unless they do these welfare measures, the country is not going to hold. So I think that it's part of the neoliberalism. It's part of what they're doing that makes them have to give these very small handouts to people in order to make sure that people at least even they're already starving, but not going to a level where starvation becomes a hunger death.
Ma'am, you have been working to abolish caste or to address casteism in India especially. So what are the observations you have found in our system regarding casteism?
No, I'm not sure. A lot of my writing does deal with that. But in terms of working, I have not formally joined any organization or something to work. But what I do realize is that there are two different things, right? One is caste discrimination, and the other thing is abolishing caste itself or annihilating caste itself. So I think to address discrimination, especially the kind that happens in universities, that you need many steps for that. Like one of the big steps is reservation, and it's not just student reservation. You need faculty reservation. You need representation. You need the right of all employees in the university to form unions. So and in workplaces again. So I think in many places this discrimination exists, and it's getting more and more emboldened, right? Like you would assume, it's 100 years since Periyar, it's so many years since the Dravidian movement, it's so many years since Ambedkar. You would assume that caste is becoming weaker. But what you observe is that actually younger people are getting radicalized. Actually school-going children are, wearing bands according to their caste, color of the band is based on their caste. So you realize that the virus is going to the most soft targets, children, women, and that is very dangerous. Sometimes it makes you question, like, has the anti-caste movement done enough? Is the state doing enough? Or is it because, a lot of mainstream and let's say our political parties doing what they call appealing to every specific vote bank and making sure that caste differences remain sharp. And I think a big important reason for the fact that these identities have become very sharp is also the rise of Hindutva. Because what is Hindutva's ultimate underlying strategy is that it wants to divide people as Hindus and Muslims, right? And when they divide us in that categories, the Muslims versus Hindus, they want everybody to unite as Hindus. So from the outside you think they're forming one front, but at the same time they want to sharpen every caste difference. So they go and work with, let's say in Tamil Nadu, the Vanniyar, so they go and work among the Konguvelalars, so they work among the Mukkalatur. They try to sharpen the caste difference to such an extent that even intercaste marriage among, let's say, similarly dominant castes is not possible. that these ideas like of honor, of caste exclusivism, caste pride, they get absolutely sharpened, and Hindutva has been working on this ground. So that makes it the fact that caste discrimination is not the easiest thing to go away.
Yeah, RSS has formed in 1925, and to the next year it would be completing its 100 years of formation. And Modi, when they planned for the third time of ruling, and they were like, when they are winning in this this time, then they would so freely and easily going to remove the word secular and equality from the Constitution of India. So they were exposed like that, but when they became slow in the result, they are actually a minor government. They are not major government.
Minority government. Yeah.
So in this context, how could we understand the graph of BJP?
See, these are two different questions, at least to me. Whether BJP was in power or not in power, like even if they didn't capture power, their centenary celebrations of the RSS was always going to be big. It's always going to be major, because that is the parent body. That is the body that has this mass surplus amount of pracharaks and full-time workers to go and do the BJP's work, to go and do the grassroots work, to do the violence, to do the community-based activity, to do the brainwashing, to do the propaganda. You can call it whatever. Maybe in Kerala they're making bombs. Maybe somewhere else they're protesting against the hijab. Whatever comes to them, whatever they fancy. Maybe somewhere else they are beating up young men because they think that they're transporting cattle. Whatever it is that the RSS and its fringe elements do, that goes on, and that project I don't think is divorced from their election project, right? That is going to happen. But the fact that Modi had a step back, did not get the majority, that I think he has himself to blame. I think at some point he started saying he's a divine being, he's a non-biological being. They said Charsa Upar, and all of this, worked negatively for them. And I also don't think that it's possible to, fool people all the time, that there was enormous pushback against people as well. And I think it's going to get worse actually. Like if they had to face another election, let's say a general election comes in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, and I think the results are going to be worse, because people are no longer going to be blinded only on the question of religion, right? You're going to ask, where are the jobs for young people? Where is the future? Because at this point, I think if you belong to the young generation today, you don't have the kind of safety net that our parents had, right? Or even another previous generation had. Like, we basically are living in a very hustle culture where you have to create the job and then go and fill up the job, So I believe that young people will start reacting against Modi, but that's my belief. Yeah.
Being a writer, how do you depict the terms class, caste and gender issues in your writings?
This is a very long question. This is an essay question. No, I try to always keep my work very feminist. I'm not going to give you elaborate answers, but just to touch this. So, and I think most of my writing in that sense is very, based on the fact that, what is a women's perspective, what's a women's experience of it, and how are women being, sometimes used to hold up the system, but sometimes, understand that the system is not working for them, and what is the social cost you pay. Because at every step as a woman, whether you want to challenge your parents, or challenge caste, or challenge your elders, or challenge your school or your college, you pay a heavy price, right? And this every woman is not ready to pay that price. So I think that paying this price is what women have been doing for every small transgression. So a lot of my work is about capturing that moment of, does a woman want to assert herself, or does she going to allow the system to assert itself? And I think that's primary. And I think that even the system, I'm not going to elaborate on the caste aspect or the other aspect. Most of my work is about that, but I think a lot of even the challenge to caste, actually a lot of it comes from women, women feeling that the system oppresses us, the system is not for us, the system regulates us, the system controls us. So I believe that unless we link all these struggles, and the big tragedy is that in a country like India, because we are so used to patriarchal thinking, we are so used to thinking that only men get it right, we don't honor the fact that women have been at the forefront of major struggles. Look at the struggle for pension funds, PF funds. It was women who got this right for everyone, women in Bangalore. Or look at what happened to Foxconn. Foxconn with 16,000 employees had to shut up shop and go away because women started protesting. 16,000 women came on the streets and they closed the highway. And this is women's militancy. And when you see women are doing this kind of massive grassroots change, we never see women as, okay, they are the leaders of the class struggle. We don't look at them as they are the leaders of the anti-caste struggle. And I remember going, for instance, in rural Tamil Nadu and writing a story in this village called Puduviralipatti, where, Dalit women were asking for the right to put VCK flags. But this was again a struggle that women are doing, like they are holding the flag and saying, okay, we're going to get this here. And I believe that in so much of, history, it's not even like I have to imagine something and write. There is the space to women that is not being given to women, and sometimes your job is to actually give them that space.
And one more question is, your book, Someone Will Arrest You.
Tomorrow someone will arrest you, yeah.
Of personal liberty and human rights. And it was published in a critical period in where human rights especially, are under a great threat. So human rights in India are in danger in the regime of Modi. What is your suggestion to the defenders of the rights?
Okay, human rights is a very interesting discourse. I am not a big fan of the word because human rights discourse is often used by imperialism to go and bomb other countries, This country doesn't follow human rights, that country doesn't follow human rights. But we leave that apart, who uses the word human rights. But having left that apart, I think the problem is that it's so many things are, enshrined under human rights. For instance, the right to form unions, trade unions, it's a human right. Nobody talks about that as a human right? But in India, what has happened is that the right to speech, the right to life, for instance, with Sai Babas, it was the right to life. He had the right to medical treatment, he had the right to life, and this, he just loses it, right? And the thing is that, and especially anybody who's, quote unquote human rights defender, they get jailed. So I have very close friends from Kerala who got arrested under UAPA, because they were asking for, better rights and other things. So I believe that, there is a very, the system is not very kind to people who talk about human rights, because the minute you're talking about human rights, I think it flashes on the RSS or BJP screen, urban Naxal, or they say danger, so they just want to clamp down on it. They want to shut up that discourse. And I think at some point Amit Shah actually said human rights is a Western concept, right? He said it's a Western concept and it's a Western import. So he's like, you don't have to lecture us because it doesn't belong to us. So this is also is happening, just refusing to treat people as people and then using these labels.
From your young age, you have been writing fiction and non-fiction. And what is the transformation that you look for in the,
You've also been writing from a young age, but yeah.
But both the cases are not the same.
Okay, tell me, yeah.
What are the transformation you have been through in both the literature? I mean, like.
No, you mean how writing has changed me, or how?
No, how could you differentiate between your fiction and non-fiction writings?
Oh, my fiction or non-fiction? Okay, well, it's quite interesting because when I started, my first book is about this kill when money atrocity, right? So 44 men, women and children, especially a lot of women and children, are burnt alive to death, and they were all Dalits in the village of Kilvenmani in the Tanjavur district, undivided Tanjavur district, because they are agitating under the red flag of communism and asking for higher wages. So the landlords just burned 44 people, they locked them in a hut and burned them to death. So, and my father comes from the Delta region, old Tanjore, and it was a part of his childhood memory, that what happened and how the landlord did this. But not just the landlord punished them, but how the people fought back, how the people took their revenge. And I wanted to write this as a story. And the problem is, in India, it's like, if you're going to look for historical records, if you're going to look for court judgments, if you're going to look for police register, it's possible to write a non-fiction story, right? Like a historical account. But I wanted to give life to these people, I wanted all my characters to speak. I wanted to make sure that, at the heart of the story is the village. The village was the hero, the village of Kilvenmani. And so I find fiction very liberating because you can imagine, you can recreate. Whereas with non-fiction, in some ways, your hands are tied. But at the same time, I also do a lot of non-fiction. So this happened in 1968. But for instance, my last non-fiction book was called The Orders Were to Rape You, Tamil Tigresses in the Elam Liberation Struggle. So this is about women who were part of the former LTT. And after the genocide that took place in 2009, these women had to, they were raped systematically by the Sri Lankan soldiers in the camps, which were run like concentration camps. And I wanted to write what they were experiencing, because these were women who had a gun and who were very powerful. And then overnight, after the genocide, they have no power. Anybody can do anything to them. And when I had to write the story, because the story is happening in front of me, I went and met these women. They were in Malaysia, they were in Indonesia, they were in Cambodia. And when I wrote the stories, I wrote it as non-fiction, because at that time they were alive, they could tell me their stories, and I did not have to imagine. I could just write the truth as it happened. So I think choosing whether something is fiction or non-fiction, it's really like the artistic freedom is because sometimes you have to tell a story through, a frame. Sometimes you can just tell the story with, real people. And so I think it's a choice that what I learn, I think it makes me make the choice.
Okay. Your book Upoad Hindutva is translated into Telugu. How do you feel about it, and how do you look at VCK politics in the context of third time regime of BJP?
I'm very proud. This book was published in English 20 years ago, so it's a long journey. And it's very interesting because, 20 years ago, you had the VCK and its leader, Tirumavalavan, talk about how important it is to challenge Hindutva, what he calls Upoad Hindutva. But 20 years later, it is still relevant. It still is a very urgent political question. And I hope that just as Tamil Nadu has benefited from the both the militant activists but also the social justice work of the VCK, the kind of things they put forward, the kind of issues they take up, I believe that Telangana also can benefit from a grassroots radical Dalit movement.
Okay. Why Tamil still require Tirukural thoughts? You have written a book on Hindu. What made you to publish that book?
No, the thing is, in terms of the Tirukural, I think the Tirukural is a very timeless text. So it dates about 2000 years or more. It's a very classical Tamil text. And at the heart of the Tirukural, it says Pirapokkum Ella Uyirkum, which means all the beings are same in birth, which is the opposite of the Manusmriti, right? Yeah. The Manusmriti says, and Tirukural also says something like Siraikakkum Kappu Evan Seyyum Magalir Niraikakkum Kappe Thalai, which means what is the point of putting women in a jail? Only women can take care of themselves, So this idea that, so at the heart of the Tirukural is the idea that women have to take care of themselves. Nobody should control them, that they are independent people. Whereas the Manusmriti is a book that says that, women should always be controlled. When she's a child, her father should control her. When she's married, the husband should control her. When she's a mother, the son should control her. So these are two polar opposites, and it's very important for Tamil people. If you want to challenge Sanatana Dharma, if you want to challenge Manuvad, if you want to challenge Brahmanvad, you need a book like Tirukural to say, no, our culture is not, this is not our culture, this is your culture, keep your culture to yourself, And therefore, I think this book becomes very important both as an anti-caste and as a feminist text.
So you try to explore the reasons and state role in your book. The Gypsy goddess about
Kill when money,
Dalit massacre. Can you explain the casteist nature of Tamil politics and also caste as a state in India?
The thing is, in Tamil politics, this is a very interesting thing. So Tamils are very progressive in general. That's the understanding, right? Like the broader understanding. Obviously, Tamils have very successfully avoided Hindi imposition. They are very proud of their identity. But when it comes to caste, I still think that caste is very consolidated, and it's getting very consolidated because of politics as well, because a lot of politicians want to keep the caste structures very tight in order to run their parties, and which is very dangerous in the long run for, because the caste identity will always overrule the Tamil identity, it prevents you to be a Tamil. So in many ways I think that, people have to wake up and, throw out that shackle or fight against it. Yeah.
Also not only BJP but in a way all the political parties have been imposing some or the other rules onto the people, right? So what do you feel the alternate idea in order to save the rights of people?
No, I don't know. Can we imagine a post-political party situation? I'm not an anarchist, so I don't think that we can have a society without. I mean, we can have Indian democracy without political parties.
Yeah.
So I'm not an anarchist. So I still believe that people have to organize. People have to organize through collectively, and it has to, whether it takes the form of movements or whether it takes the form of parties, whether they are parties that contest elections or don't contest elections. I don't believe that the task of organizing, collectivizing, but also having a structure, because you cannot achieve anything without a structure, and that's the truth.
Yeah.
And I say this as a person who is only a writer, who doesn't have any boss, this freedom is good for expressing yourself, but if you want to really do change, you need structure, you need organization.
Yeah. Also, Sai Baba has released. He came out and he lived for 6 to 7 months, so, and after that he passed away. And likewise, so many intellectuals are still in jail. They might come out with in the same condition like Sai Baba came. So what do you think that how could we come out of such situations and we can freely start questioning the governments and we can fight for our rights?
See, the kind of deterioration of health that took place over 10 years for Sai Baba shows that even a small surgery like a gallbladder surgery, his entire system shuts down. It shows the damage that has been done to him because of the lack of medical treatment, lack of proper care, lack of care at the right time. And when it comes to the other prisoners as well, I think at some point we were very worried that VV would die in prison. We were worried about Hani Babu because he had got this black fungus infection. We were worried about Anand because he's an asthmatic. So everybody is, undergoing some health problem or the other. I think that, with Sai's death, and if there's something that we can do to gain a momentum and to have a demands, the first is to ask for the repeal of the UAPA. The second is to demand unconditional release of all political prisoners. And I think people have to get behind these demands in a big way. And I don't think the aim is to just say, as you said, can we all freely question the government? Because it's true we want to question the government, but it's not just because we get a high from questioning the government. We are questioning the government so that tomorrow our children have, something to call their own, like the forests are there, that all the land is not given away to corporates, that we don't live in this very polluted place. I mean, so much of the kind of what we call questioning is not just a questioning out of arrogance, right? It's a questioning that comes from a deep-seated care for this land, for its people, for our children's future.
Yeah. Today Sai Baba has left us, but he has left with some questions to us. So what do you think those questions would be, and also the answers?
I think that the main thing about Sai is passing is that in some way it has shaken the conscience of everybody. Because for 10 years, you imagine for 10 years he was in prison, all our efforts and all the silence, nothing could save him. And even when he came out, as you were telling me earlier, the system had wrecked him so badly that he just passed away in hardly 200 days or something. And I think if we are going to be true to Sai, as I said to you, we need these two demands, right? The repeal of the UAPA and the unconditional release of all political prisoners. But to continue Sai's legacy, and this is on multiple fronts. So for instance, as a scholar of English, I think that what he was really trying to do with his PhD, but also was trying to tell me, for instance, he talked about the gypsy goddess when we met, and he said, your novel is so different from all the books that have come out in Indian English. That's because you wrote about class struggle, you wrote about rural women, you wrote about Dalit people, whereas most of Indian writing in English doesn't touch these topics. So I think what we'll have to do is, we have to ask the same questions to literature today. To ask people, who are you writing for? What is your literature for? Is it about your tiny little urban bubble? Because, I live in a city. My life is also about, going to one of these nice cafes and having a croissant, having a latte. But is that the life you want to write about? Or do you want to write a life that, shakes people up and ask them very important questions about what's the state of the world around us? So I think what has happened is that at some point, writing has become so narcissistic, so self-obsessed, that people write about this bubble. They don't want to know anything outside of this bubble. And I think Sai was one of those few critics who could question that. And this is from the scholarly point of view. And I think as an activist, Sai did tremendous work, tremendous amount of work in terms of questioning the corporate, the neoliberal agenda, the religious agenda, the issue of reservation policy, multiple fronts. And I think these are struggles we'll have to take up as well. So one of those things that, led to Sai having this direct confrontation with the center, with Chidambaram going after him, the fact that the UAPA was filed against him during Chidambaram's regime, I think so much of that actually comes back to the fact that he was opposing Project Green Hunt. And Project Green Hunt, the aim of it and the background to it, whether you consider it the Salwa Judum, the use of the paramilitary, the use of, this scorched earth policy to just do land grab. The thing is that project has not stopped. Maybe it's no longer called Operation Green Hunt, but it has new names. So, like 2 years ago, I visited Bastar, and what I saw there, I visited Silgare, and what I saw there is that, they call it Samadhan Prahar or whatever. But, the entire land you just go to, you get down at some place, and there are 36 military checkpoints to go from a distance that's hardly 2 hours away. And why are we doing it to our own people? There's all these military bases, absolute, in the middle of the forest, military bases. And that should not be how, life is. And the thing is that in the name of, whatever they are doing, development, investment, all these big words, is that they are taking land away from the people, and that they're taking the forests away from the people, they're taking the way of life away from the people, and they're not doing it, I'm not telling that they should do it softly, but they're doing it with the most ruthless force, they're doing it in the most terroristic manner, and anybody who questions that becomes or gets labeled as a terrorist. So I think this whole Operation Kagar was about elimination of, Adivasi people, basically Adivasi people who are resisting. So just from January you have had 180 Adivasis who've been killed in encounters according to the government of India. So this has to stop, and this cannot be stopped by the people of Central India. They don't have access to the same kind of media we have, they don't have access to the same kind of platforms we have, they don't have access to as many constituencies as we have, they cannot change political public policy. What they can do is to fight away their own annihilation. They can only keep death at bay, like they can say, maybe today I'm not going to die, I'm going to die in 3 months' time. They can only stall death. They can stall the death that's coming to them. So this becomes our responsibility as fellow Indians to say, no, stop killing these people, stop taking their lands. So, and I think this is one of the things that we have to do to continue Sai Babas' legacy.
Yeah, in order to stand with Adivasis and other downtrodden people in India, we also have an option that in India we have so many left-inclined organizations and parties as well. In this context, in order to fight with all the political parties, especially fascist parties, do we need to unite all these left-inclined organizations and parties in order to face all such things?
See, that's a very interesting thing. The idea is that, people always talk about the fragmentation of the left. But I don't think that the fragmentation of the left is the reason why we have not been able to stop fascism. Okay. I think that's a very juvenile view, because I think left parties inherently, and this is not from now, this is from, let's say, the Bolshevik times. Yeah. Let's say from the time of Lenin was fighting with Trotsky was fighting with somebody else, So they've always had these left intellectual debates on what is the right way to go about things, yeah? So if you look at Lenin's April thesis, this big book of what is good, what is the right thing to do, what's not the right thing to do. So a lot of left, this is 100 years ago. The history of the left is disagreement. The history of the left is disagreement. The history of the left is deciding what's the right way of going about things. This is confusion because, see, it's very easy to do fascism. It's very easy to do authoritarianism. It's not so easy to do something that, takes people's, especially something that's opposed to ruling class ideology, right? You have to discuss, you have to debate. It's only, see, if there is left fragmentation, it's sign of something democratic happening. And it's good. But what I think we have to do is, you cannot unite all the left. But what I think we have to do is, we have to form mass movements, And I think everybody has to come together on a common minimum program. Like, let's say, okay, these are 3 demands, and we are going to be together for these 3 demands. And I think that unless we have to become very demand based, and we have to also, I don't think that, these tiny parties themselves can do, unless you bring people, unless all of us become part of it, because it's very easy to, sit here like this and say, okay, the left is the problem, but the left is at least doing something, and we have only started talking. So in so many ways, all of us will have to put our strength behind some party or the other, and get something done. So
yeah. But coming to the aspect of Sai Baba, he has worked with most of the left inclined organizations. He didn't have any rule that I shouldn't go there and I shouldn't walk along
Yes.
with the branches. So he has
Sai in that sense is a great example of how to unite a lot of people and bring them together. So yes,
if in that
he's
case,
an inspiration for us to do that.
of
Yeah.
So if it is the case and all the parties has come into a single platform,
Common front, yeah.
then which one should have to be to be the leading force?
I can't answer this question, no. But yeah, this is very interesting. I mean, I think that's the kind of thing that circumstances will decide, like not anybody, and definitely not me. But yeah, but I think Sai is the kind of person who has shown us the way on how to forge these alliances.
We have really lost a great intellectual and activist. Okay, Meena Kandaswamy,
Thank
it is
you.
so nice to
Thank
talk
you.
to you.
Thank you, Viplavas.